Hey, Greysteel Nation, Sully here with the Barbell Prescription, keeping you strong and healthy in your 60s, 70s, 80s, and beyond. Thanks for checking in and subscribing. This is going to be probably, not certainly, but quite probably the last of the C7 Chronicles. Thank you for staying with us to this point, but this is probably going to be our final update, at least for a while, unless something happens, and at this point it'd probably have to be something untoward to happen. So hopefully it is the last of the C7 updates. This is a chronicle of my training journey and my personal journey after suffering a C7 radiculopathy. That is a pinched nerve in my neck that affected the function of my left arm and hand and caused me a considerable amount of pain, at least for a while, and made it almost impossible to train the upper body movements and quite difficult to train the lower body movements as well. And if you want to catch up with what happened, just go back and look at the previous C7 Chronicles. Perhaps you'll find it enlightening, especially if you're dealing with a similar circumstance yourself. That's why I made these videos, in the hopes that they might prove helpful to some of you. Should you encounter a similar scenario. So where are we at? Long story short, I'm still getting better. I've gotten a lot better. I have almost no pain anymore. I still have an occasional weird, what we doctors call a paresthesia, a slightly off sensation in my hand or in my arm from time to time. I don't have the fasciculations anymore, which was the twitching of my triceps muscle, which really completely weirded me out. In a way, that was almost worse than the pain or the dysfunction because it made me think bad thoughts. It's an example of being a doctor and knowing too much. Fasciculations go with radiculopathy, but they also go with some other stuff that's a lot uglier and a lot worse. So those have resolved, and the strength has returned. I'm still continuing with my range of motion exercises, using my neck stretcher for cervical traction. I'm still continuing with Tylenol and NSAIDs, although not quite as regularly as before because I don't need them as much. Very careful warm-ups and so on. So I don't consider myself cured. And in fact, I'm almost certainly not cured. This is a herniated cervical disc, and they don't just go away. So once you've got a herniated cervical disc, you're probably never quite the same at that vertebral level ever again. You've got, a lesion there, but it has healed up. I'm continuing to treat myself as if I have a lesion there that requires management. The cervical traction is not unpleasant. It's just a few minutes a day. The neck range of motion exercises, just a few minutes a day. And I've just incorporated that into my morning movement routine. So easy to get done. So what about my progress? I'm pretty happy with it, actually. I'm back in the 90 to 95% range on all of my exercises, which is awesome. So yesterday I did 337.5 on the squat. That's 95% exactly. I hit 152 in the overhead press. I'm back at 390 on the deadlift. That's not quite 95%, but I'm confident that I'll get back to 410, 415 pretty soon. And I'm still hopeful to get some PRs this year on all the lifts, but on the deadlift, I've got my eye on 425. The bench press is where things first became evident. One day, I think I'm having a trapezius cramp. I try to bench press 135, which is a very light warm-up for me. It's my second warm-up, and the bar just goes all haywire because my triceps won't fire. So I couldn't even lift 135 for a while. I was doing singles, heavy singles at 95 as part of my rehab. So this week I got 230 up again. And I'm looking for some PRs on that as well this year. I've also started the O lifts, but I think I'm going to allow myself to be satisfied with lifting, maybe 90% of what I used to do. I think I may have achieved some lifetime PRs in the Olympic lifts. I don't know. We'll just see. But the Olympic lifts are so dynamic, and they are high impact. And sometimes I get a little bit of a tingling after I do them. So I think I'm going to have to be judicious with the Olympic lifts. I'll never stop doing them unless there's an absolute contraindication to doing them. But I think I'm going to have to adjust my expectations for the Olympic lifts, but not for the slow lifts. My martial arts, I've continued doing throughout, but now I'm able to do them more dynamically again, a little bit more explosively and powerfully without any ill effect. So I'm pretty happy. I couldn't even do the prowler for a while because prowler push sort of stressed that area and made things difficult. But now I'm able to push the prowler again, which is huge because I was getting to the point where I seriously needed some conditioning. So what have I learned from all this? I think one thing that I've learned is that it's important not to get complacent and to be grateful for our ability to train. You know, I was in this sort of phase where I was making good progress and my training was really going quite well. And I was happy with it, but, I was annoyed by this and annoyed by that, just being impatient. When in fact, I should have had gratitude for the fact that I was able to train at all. A lot of people can't train. It was a real eye-opener to what I was missing. And so don't be complacent and be grateful that you can train at all. Maybe you're not training at the level you want. Maybe you're having problems with your training, but be grateful that you can train at all. It really is a gift that if you're able to do this, that you do it. The second thing I've learned, something I knew anyway, but it was a refresher, you can come back. You can have something, pretty bad happen that really stops your training in its tracks, and you can come back. So don't despair. This too shall pass, and you might have to adjust your training going forward, perhaps indefinitely, but you will be able to train again. You will be able to train again. When you do, you have to focus on what you can do, not on what you can't do. So I wasn't able to train at all for several weeks because of this. And when I came back, it was like, well, I can't do the press and I can't do the bench and I can't do the O-lifts. What's the point? Well, the point is to train your squat and your deadlift. Yeah, you can't do the upper body lifts right now, but I could certainly do some squats. Maybe they weren't as heavy as what I was doing before. I could do some deadlifts. They weren't as heavy as what I was doing before, but it did me a lot of good to just focus on what you can do instead of what you can't do. It was me having to take a taste of my own medicine and walk my own talk. I often tell people training around an injury is a fundamental skill for an athlete, and it's one that we're all going to have to call upon at some time in our training. You have to train around injuries because everybody's going to get injuries and tweaks. So, focus on what you can do, not what you can't do. It's a maximum of training for masters, and especially for masters who are dealing with an issue. And then in terms of technical issues, I won't say that it's something that I've learned, but it's something that I'm starting to think about very deeply. I looked back very critically at some of my own training videos and looked at what was going on with my neck. And I did see that I was, doing some weird stuff with my neck particularly when I squat and deadlift and press. And did that play some sort of contributory role in the development of this injury? I have no idea. I don't remember any inciting event that caused this radiculopathy to ensue. But I do know that when I look at my old training videos, which I usually look at to make sure I've got my hip drive, my back angle is good, and I'm not committing any grievous form errors, I wasn't really looking at my neck that much. And now when I look at my neck, I see that I'm doing all sorts of extraneous movement with my neck. And I think the neck is like the wrist. The wrist is not part of the kinetic chain for any exercise that we do. The same is true of the neck. Your neck should not be in the power train for any exercise that you do, and it shouldn't be moving at all. You want a completely neutral neck position throughout the entire movement pattern of every exercise. And I wasn't doing that. And so you had better believe that for the past several months, I've been paying very, very close attention to what I do with my neck. And my training partners, Gail Eubanks and Scott Moss, who have been keeping an eye on me during this entire process, they've been calling me out. And in particular, Gail Eubanks has helped me develop some cues for keeping my neck in a neutral position. And this whole process has led me to a reevaluation of the way we should think about our gaze position, because our gaze position is influenced by where our neck is and vice versa. I think Ripito is entirely correct that gaze position is critically important to the proper execution of the movements. But I think that there may be room for refinement in the way we coach gaze position for all of these movements. We'll see. I'm continuing my evaluation of that. So that's it. This was, I would rather not have experienced all of this, but I did try to learn from it. I think it's made me a better coach and a better lifter, a better athlete. And I just want to say, before we provisionally complete this series, the C7 Chronicles, that I'm very, very grateful to all of you who watched and added your words of support and advice, and it meant the world to me, and it helped keep me going. And I felt a very strong need not to let you all down. So, there were times, as always, when these kinds of things occurs where I was just like, the hell with it. No, can't do that. I felt you all had my back, and for that, I'm very, very grateful. Thank you all very much. So that's it. And we have some more videos coming up for you. We have a video on conditioning coming up next week. We just filmed a video on the squat, and we got more great stuff coming at you pretty soon. So until I see you again, stay strong and stay healthy. Thanks for watching.